Thanks for joining me on episode 1005 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Stephanie Scheller. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and create your greatest impact on the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Grow yourself, be inspired, listen to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with Scott Mader.
What's so difficult about that is a lot of times this now financial emergency is happening right alongside a health emergency. That's part of what makes this so difficult. You're dealing with two different sets of stresses. You're dealing with two different sets of emergencies. It's why having someone on your side, having an advocate who can help with you and walk with you through it and help you. Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about investing in others through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about why sometimes your health care can screw up your money. I talk about why that happens and some things you can do about it, and I also share how to approach the situation in a productive way. As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon. One of those things that can happen is we can have events in our life that really mess with our money. And one of them that I've seen come up is around health care and health problems. Given that Barbie was talking about being a health advocate, I wanted to talk a little bit today about how what happens with our health can screw up our money. Now, I've talked before about how our money and our health are tied together, but in this case, I want to specifically talk about what happens when, for instance, you have a health situation that costs a lot of money and you've gone to the hospital, maybe you've got a large bill and you can't pay it right now. I've seen a lot of folks do things like put a very large medical expense on a credit card, and the problem is that now moves it from being a medical problem to being a credit card issue. And the truth is, usually you're better off dealing with it while it's in the medical system. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what we can practically do when we have a large medical bill. And the first thing is to be proactive, to actually start having that conversation, if possible, before you get the bill. Now, obviously, there are emergency situations where if you're rushed to the emergency room with a heart attack or after a car accident, you don't have a long conversation about the bill. They just treat you. But at the same time, as soon as you get into a point where you can, begin talking with the healthcare provider about what your options are, about what the situation is, about how much insurance you have or what you have available to you if you don't have insurance. Begin to have a proactive conversation about what you can do to minimize and pay for the situation without creating a situation where now, because of a medical bill, you end up declaring bankruptcy or having other huge medical problems. You know, our medical system is such that they usually will treat you for an emergency situation. But then if you don't have insurance, it oftentimes can impact you negatively financially. I've seen more folks going bankrupt or struggling because of medical bills than almost any other financial situation. The big ones are credit cards, medical, and student loans. But medical is for sure one of those. It happens because it's so integral to what we have to do. You're not going to ask questions about it. You're going to have the work done. You're going to have the operation done. You're going to have the healthcare done because our health is so important to us. It's about our survival. And there's nothing wrong with that. This isn't a bad thing. But how can we handle it productively? How can we handle it in a way that helps us get ahead of it? A lot of times, too, it's about having the honest conversation. I've coached clients through going in, actually showing their income situation, showing their financial situation, showing what their bills are, sitting down and having a conversation with the hospital or with the doctor and just working out a payment plan. Oftentimes, they will work with you to come up with a plan that is fair for them and they still get paid, and yet is also fair for you and doesn't destroy your ability to actually survive. Remember, most medical people, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a doctor, have gone into the business because they want to help people. They've gone into it because they care about people. If you can talk to them as a person and talk to them about helping you, usually they will work with you to help you. And it doesn't cost you anything, because at the end of the day, let's face it, let's assume for a minute it doesn't work that way. You can always go back to the other things. You can always go back to paying it in some other way, declaring bankruptcy if that's the situation that you're in and you have to make that choice. But the point is, you happen to the situation instead of the situation happening to you. What's so difficult about that is a lot of times this now financial emergency is happening right alongside a health emergency. That's part of what makes this so difficult. You're dealing with two different sets of stresses. You're dealing with two different sets of emergencies. It's why having someone on your side, having an advocate who can help with you and walk with you through it and help you settle down and say, this is what I need to do first. This is what I need to do second. This is what I need to do third, can be so important. Not because you don't know what to do, but just because there's so much that you're dealing with, because you've got to deal with your health and your recovery, and you've also got to deal with the now financial issues that come up. That's usually how people get into trouble. They're so buried with everything that's going on that they ignore the bills. They push them away because they just can't deal with one more thing. And then by the time they go to deal with it, it's already turned into a big problem. They're already behind. They've already been not communicating. Maybe they've been ignoring the bills and ignoring the calls. And now they're cleaning up a mess instead of being proactive. The key, just like Barbie was talking about, the key to being your advocate for your health care is to be proactive and involved. The key for dealing with the financial implications of it is about being proactive and involved. The key, too, is to make sure that you're able to do both of those and maintain your health and your financial as well as your physical health through the situation. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the US 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.